We are going to record, and I am going to officially welcome you to today's discussion. We're so excited to have you with us to talk about the consequences of gender inequality. And certainly right now, corporate America is at a crossroads. Today, we are so lucky to have with us Denise Cooper, the founder and CEO of Remarkable Leadership Lessons. She's a best-selling author, she's an executive coach, and a keynote speaker. And I could not be more excited to have Denise with us today to talk about the consequences of gender inequality. And I'm Linda Fisk, the CEO of LeadHERship Global, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome all of you to the program today. Thank you so much. Now, just as an FYI, just to bring you up to speed, if you're not familiar with LeadHERship Global, it is the most impactful community of extraordinary women in the world, women like Denise, who is a LeadHERship Global member. We unleash the full potential of high-performing and growth-oriented leaders in a confidential, supportive, and private community. LeadHERship Global helps members accelerate their success by defining their vision, growing their leadership, expanding their influence, and leaving a lasting legacy. And if you're interested in learning more about this absolutely remarkable community of leaders that are in business, entertainment, and even politics, then please reach out. It would be my pleasure to get to know each and every one of you a bit more deeply. Now, for today's conversation, in a year that has absolutely been marked by crisis and uncertainty, corporate America is at a crossroads. And the choices that companies make today will have consequences on gender equality for decades to come. The pandemic has simply intensified the challenges that women already faced between balancing childcare, school, household labor, and a full-time job. And now companies risk losing women in leadership and future women leaders and unwinding years of painstaking progress towards gender diversity and gender equality. So what needs to change in the workplace to create an equitable work environment for women? Well, as leaders, we need to take responsibility to cut down the time it will take for women to receive equality in the workplace. We'll explore these questions and more with our guest today, Denise Cooper, the founder and CEO of Remarkable Leadership Lessons, best-selling author, executive coach, and keynote speaker. Women have been in the workplace since World War II, and yet the latest report from the World Economic Forum indicates it's going to take, get this, over 200 years before women realize equity in the workplace. So why isn't gender equity progressing faster? Denise will respond to that, and we will all discuss what it takes to make quicker progress towards gender equity and what actions you can take today as a leader to speed up progress towards gender diversity and gender equity. I absolutely can't wait for the conversation today. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Denise. As I noted, Denise Cooper is the founder and CEO of Remarkable Leadership Lessons, a company that was founded 10 years ago to assist C-suite, senior level business leaders, and managers in raising their game as contributors to profitability. Denise currently serves as an executive coach and a keynote speaker with a proven process for grooming diverse candidates for succession through one-on-one customized coaching, professional assessments, and time-proven case studies. She shares her experience in her book, Remarkable Leadership Lessons, Change Results One Conversation at a Time. It's designed to let you see the power and potential within you and how to show up, speak up, and step up to get the results you really want. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody who has taken an hour of their time. The most precious thing that we have is non-renewable resources, and time is number one. So thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation.
That's great. And so to begin with, Denise, I gotta say, 257 years, holy cow. I don't know about the rest of you, but to me, that feels like way too long to establish true gender equality in the workplace. So why is it projected to take so long? Why, after we created a vaccine for COVID in less than a year, will it take us more than 200 years to solve the problem of gender equality in the workplace? Why do you think it's projected to take so long?
Well, it's such a huge question. And even when you say it, it's just that much bigger and it seems so formidable. But one of the things that we don't really understand very well as people is the process of change. What this number is, this study from the World Economic Forum saying that it would take 257 years to dismantle and inequality for women, what it really is talking about what we've done in the past. And it really should be a call to arms that says, hey, wait a minute, we need to do something different because that's just not acceptable. If we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to get the same results we've always gotten. That's a famous saying by many, many people. So this is really this thing right now where we're sitting at, where we're seeing the dismantling of so many old habits and old constructs for leadership and how we be with each other and work with each other. This is really a call to action to say, look, we have to rethink how we're going to go forward. Because if we don't, we're not going to change the results. And that's what this is really about. This is about a time in our history where we, each and every last one, and particularly women, we have the opportunity to step up, show up, and change the results so that we can bring that back, bring equality and equity to our lifetime.
I love that, Denise. That's such an inspirational statement. And, you know, because of a year in quarantine, it's now reported that women are making plans to or have already left the workforce at a much faster rate than ever before. And we're also hearing that younger workers are kind of reevaluating their workplace choices. So if I'm thinking about doing this as a woman, what should I consider and how should I prepare for that?
Well, you know, step back a minute and dig a little deeper into this. What are women leaving the workforce to do? And there's basically a couple paths that we're starting to see from the research and the early data. One is women are starting their businesses faster than ever before. And so they're just saying, I'm tired with what you're doing. I see a need. I'm going to jump out. The other is that we're coming to a point where ageism is really hitting, and older people in general are kind of being locked out of the workforce. Now, we don't like to talk about ageism, but it really is the dirty little secret in terms of hiring and workplace practices. And there's a lot of reasons for that, from the salaries too much to people aren't changing to you can get cheaper people to do the same job. And the way we think about business is such that we're always constantly looking at cost. There's a story behind that Simon Sinek talks about, of how we shifted from people are important to shareholders important and the impact over 30 years of that. And then the third thing that women are starting to do is that they're stepping out of the workplace to step back and reassess what is really important to them. And right now, because we don't have childcare or family care or ability to support those people who have to care for other people, people are stepping back and saying, what's really important to me is my family. What's really important to me is my legacy. And one of the statistics that you did mention is within the next 2 to 3 years, 71 million people will be in this retirement stage and trying to decide what their next chapter is. If we think about the workforce, 50% of the workforce is women. So 50% of those are going to be caregivers, primary caregivers. They're going to be reimagining and re-envisioning what it is that they want for their life and how they're going to achieve it. So the way we got into this is that we haven't changed the habits of before. We haven't re-envisioned what we need to do next. And with that, when we re-envision what needs to happen, we have to also look at what is it going to take for us to get to where we need to go, what skills we need, what knowledge we need, but how do we apply that so that we're actually delivering the kinds of results that we want?
That's right. And, you know, one of the things that you talk quite a bit about, both in your book and also in your speaking opportunities, is the idea of allyship. And you talk about allyship in the workplace. How can we as women be more active in building partnerships and building allies within the workplace. And can you talk a little bit about why that's important, why women should be uniquely focused on building allies in the workplace?
Well, I'm going to tell you one of the stories, maybe two stories out of the book. And the first one is Aiden and Susan. Aiden is a guy who joined a new company. He was in charge of the strategic project management office for the entire company. And he had a couple openings. He came to me, we talked about it. And one of the openings, he put out to notice on job boards and whatnot, but had some candidates, had contacted his network, was about to fill it. HR came and said, we really want to give an internal candidate a chance. Can you take Susan? And it was, I'm a good team player. I haven't been here but a couple months. Let me go ahead and do it. Took Susan. Susan didn't have all the skills that he needed to do it, but he also didn't know her. Within 3 months, all of a sudden he realized that one of the problems that Susan was facing was her communication skills, her reputation in the company as being difficult to be with. And we all know what that means, women, when we're difficult to be with in the company. And also just her ability to lead was based on the old leadership model of command and control. I tell you what to do, you do it, and then we're now I'm a leader kind of thing. And so he had a real problem because that is not what gets the project management team working in a way that they can implement the projects and the strategic initiatives for the company. So he had a crossroads. He had come from a place where he had really good leadership and people who had taught him. And they taught him that relationships matter more than anything else. And if you want to deliver results, then you definitely have to have the relationships in place. He went to HR and HR said, well, we'll write her up and we can get rid of her. What he also found out was everybody knew about Susan's reputation, that she was difficult, hard to get along with. Her skills weren't a good match, but nobody informed him when he said yes to taking her on. So he came to me and he was feeling a little betrayed about it. He also wanted to know, how can I live up to my values of making sure that my people have the skills and the will to do a good job? And so what we did was we wound up working together to talk about and how to help have the first conversation with Susan, because you can't be an ally if the person you're trying to help doesn't agree to it. And that was a tough conversation because Susan had been burned a number of times and felt betrayal. And so he had to figure out a way to gain her trust. And then when she started trusting him and saw that he truly was trying to be an ally, then they could have a conversation for how they were going to move forward. From there, he gave her some skills and explained to her about project management, helped her on that end. But he also had to go around and make sure that everyone that she was working with in these other departments would give her the opportunity to grow, the opportunity to change. And so being that ally, he used his skills and his relationships to get them to give her a chance and the room to grow. Because here's the issue with growth. We don't do it perfectly. And so if you're looking to see me fail, because that's who you know me is going to be, when I try to change and grow and I don't do it right, then guess what? Everybody's like, yep, I told you, I knew that person. Yep, that's who she is. So he had to strategically build a safe place for her to succeed in the company. The cost of that, imagine that. So take that story in. Imagine the cost to the company. Susan had been in several places where she was marginally performing, but they kept her for whatever reason, because we don't know that backstory. But they kept her around, not talking to her. So emotionally and the mental health issues that she was taking on of not feeling valued, not feeling wanted, not feeling good enough, not feeling like she succeeded were taking a toll on her, which means her brain was actually shutting down and she was unable to see solutions that were going to help her. Aiden, on the other hand, was sitting here wrestling with, how do I help someone who right now is shut down? How do I open her up? So imagine all the time and energy that he was spending, not just helping her, but also changing the culture and the people that they worked with to give her the room to grow and to show up in a different way and contribute to the organization. I'm happy to say that within 6 months, 7 months, we were able to make it so that Susan really could show up differently, and that she was a willing party to want to show up better and to see Aiden as an ally, not someone who was just there as her boss, whatever that means to anybody. The organization wound up getting a much better team because leaders teach each other how to be with each other through their role modeling. So how you act as a leader is also the way people get clues on what leadership actually means. So if you see somebody like a Susan and she's not doing well, and you step back as a leader and go, well, you know, I kind of could do it, or I didn't do it, or you treat her in a way that isn't embracing and helping and learning, guess what? They're going to see that if they don't live up to your standard, then they can't come to you, ask for help, or get guidance from you. And so now what you've done is you've internalized as a rule, as a boundary, as a ground, as a value for your team, that it's not okay to be vulnerable, not okay to ask for help, and not okay to support each other. That's the cost of us not doing this, because each one of us teaches each other how to be with someone. And if we have leaders who are not embracing this, not role modeling, opening up, helping, focusing on developing their team, building the capacity to do more, then we have an issue of everyone else is going to start thinking about, I'm not worthy of that kind of treatment either. And then they lose their ability to perform at a higher level. They don't lift themselves up to see what a greater potential that they have. And if I can't see that I have more potential, then guess what? I'm not going to go after it.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And, you know, you were talking about how as leaders, you need to role model allyship. You need to role model what it is to ensure that you're creating a safe and transparent workplace. But for many women, it can be difficult to kind of speak out against gender inequality due to a fear of being seen as bossy or too outspoken or maybe difficult to work with. So how can we be allies, be leaders, and overcome that fear of speaking out against gender inequality and somehow mitigate the risk of being seen as too outspoken or difficult to work with?
Well, the interesting thing is I think for all of us, we have to take a step back and a deep breath. And that is, men are afraid, women are afraid, we're all afraid of showing up as insensitive. We're afraid of not being enough. We're afraid of offending other individuals. And so this fear that you talk about that women have, the thing we know is that once you come from a place of fear and protectionism, it causes other people to do the same. And so the first thing we have to do is we have to open ourselves up to be vulnerable enough to say, to invite that we may not do it right. I believe that we can say anything, do anything we want. It's always in the approach that we take. And so instead of trying to figure out how to be perfect, step back and start thinking about what can I do that will open up the space so that people can hear me and that together we can grow and become more productive, have a different kind of relationship. So if you're afraid that you're going to be labeled the bully, the other B word, whatever it is that you're concerned with, the a-hole, however it is, I would say that the first thing you're doing is coming from a place of fear. And so reframe the question, because in fear, in facing fear, you can never move forward. So reframe the question to this: how can I get different results than where I am? And what are those results that I really want to see? And if it is to feel more valued, if it is to have a bigger impact in your business or with your clients or in your workspace, then start being curious as to what does that mean? How do other people see it? Because one of the issues that we spend a lot of time is we spend a lot of time in our head. We write our own stories, and our stories is based on our past. And so if we felt locked out before, then guess what the problem is that we're going to define? And the interesting thing about our brains is it is a heat-seeking missile for problems and reasons why we shouldn't. Okay. So you have to turn the switch to, what is it that I can do and how would I do it? Where can I find new information so that I can partner with people, I can practice, I can get better over time at stepping up and speaking up, being prepared to speak up in meetings, being prepared to take on those hard questions. When you do that, you'll have the confidence to stick your toe in the water and move one step further.
Yeah, that's great advice, great guidance. Thank you so much, Denise. I want to talk a little bit about the HR function in corporate America, because generally, the idea of gender equality and generally diversity, equity, and inclusion is often laid at the feet of HR. And the HR function is comprised of nearly 80% women. So what's HR's role in this? What can they do to speed up achieving gender equity, but also more broadly, diversity, equity, and inclusion for all people in a workplace?
Well, if we take the function of HR, well, let me step back. If we take, what does it take to change? There's three things that hold cultures in place. The first is that the leaders are role modeling what is acceptable. Employees or people around them are saying, yes, this is acceptable and I'm following your lead. But then there's HR's role. And HR's role is to create the structure that it codifies the culture itself, that says, this is how we do things here. This is what it looks like. And so from that perspective, HR and HR professionals are responsible for looking at the impact of the policies to see if those policies and procedures, the way we treat people, is actually living up to what we envision our workplace ought to be. The problem that we're struggling with right now is it's not my study, but Josh Bersin did a study 2 years ago where he asked 3,500 HR people, where did they feel their skill and competency level of knowledge and ability was when it comes to things. Well, it was 20 different areas, but the ones I want to pick out are HR solutions and design, change and transformation, leadership development, leading the HR functions, particularly during change. And what came out on those 20 indicators is that the majority of people thought that they were beginners. And in areas of diversity and inclusion and HR solutions in particular, what came up is 80% of them said that they were beginners in their knowledge, skills, and abilities to deliver results on those areas. So imagine that if the generalized function, believes that they are the beginners on 20 metrics, then how is it that they're going to help move forward? And so one of the things I've done is I've put together with a friend of mine, Pamela Brooks, who happens to be on this call today, and we're putting together an HR masterclass on May 17th to help HR people find their voice and understand how change actually happens, and to begin to build the skills and knowledge so that they can deliver different results in the organization. You will not step up and speak up and help change if you don't feel like you know what you're doing, if you don't feel like you're enough. So you've got to understand what the lay of the land is and how you can move forward. And it is important that if we're going to speed this up, we're going to not see 250 years before equity comes to the workplace, then we have to be able to understand the structures in place and how we can evolve them to a place where they are actually delivering the results that we want. And that's the purpose of HR. HR has to understand how to do change and transformational change, particularly in the leadership, but more importantly in those HR business partners relationships. We have to start having conversation with leaders that are about change and transformation or evolution. What are the one or two things that we can begin to do to move this forward so that we realize the vision that we have for equity in the workplace?
I love that. And what if you're part of the management team, Denise, if you're not in the HR function, but you're part of the management team, what can leaders, managers, people managers do to speed up this idea of achieving equity in the workplace?
Well, I think that the onus really is on them to start thinking about this as a business problem. And so here's an example. When I talk to executives, particularly men, CEOs, et cetera, they're talking about, oh, how can we do this? This is so tough. We don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And I say, it's very interesting, because if this was a supply chain problem and that you had vendors and you had people who were making your raw materials and people who were delivering your product in the line, and there was a break in it, you would be all over it. And if your head of operations came to you and said, oh, I don't know how to do this, I don't know what to do, the first thing you would do is fire them and get somebody in there who knew what to do. That is kind of this is the same problem, because what we're doing with our workforce is we're building a pipeline that improves our capacity to deliver to a customer who's going to pay us for a service or a product that we are delivering. And so for executives and business folks, we need to really start understanding and taking a partnership leadership on what does this look like. We can't have where we sit and we say, strategically, we're going to improve the number of women. We're going to break the pipeline for diversity, and we're not going to have these glass ceilings, concrete ceilings, whatever you want to call it. On one hand, and then when you do the budget, finance is sitting there saying, oh, you got a zero budget here. I don't understand. You can't add no more. You can't add any more headcount. And HR is saying, well, you can't fire those people because they're already in the position, and the law will get you because you're now reverse discriminating. You see how each of the different departments are actually fighting to keep the system in place. And we have to start saying, no, how can we think about this differently? Managers and the management team has to start thinking of this as a supply chain and an environment in which we're going to grow the talent for the capacity of the growth of the business. And so if we can help them shift and see the interconnectedness of these conversations that are random and seem to be so powerful, but how they're really interconnected and keeping us stagnant, then I think we have a chance. And that is the role that management can do. They can open up their mind and say, this is a business problem. And it looks just like my supply chain. It looks like my product development. It looks like my customer acquisition problem.
I love that, Denise. That's right. If you bring it into a business context, it seems a lot less divisive. Mm-hmm. So we have a couple really great questions. So I'm going to open it up to some of the questions. I want to start with Laura and then move over to Rob, because Rob offered some really great insight and questions as well. But let's start with Laura, who had a question about culture. Laura, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Denise directly, please?
Thank you so much. So I have to identify exactly where that question was at. It's just, what is the company culture? I mean, for example, my studies when I was a doctoral candidate and a doctoral student involved men and their role in the family and women's role in the workforce. And what type of culture is encouraging women to progress in their roles? And to what extent, for example, are men, the husbands or the partners per se, are they encouraged to participate in business meetings, in any type of extracurricular, for example, activities? One of the things that really stuck out in my research was, if it's not Mr. Mom, is it Miss Dad? And the bumbling idiot, so to speak, the father at home who doesn't know how to change a diaper. I was that mom, and not a father, or know how to turn on a vacuum cleaner. Then to what connotation is that regarding a woman's place, so to speak, in the workforce? If the father's at home, a bumbling idiot, then what's the connotation about a woman's role in the workforce that she's not taking seriously?
Yeah, really smart question, Laura. And one of the things that you said in chat, which I love, is how does the organizational culture support women as the main wage earner? So Denise, what's your thought there?
Well, I think that we ought to go back to the HR structure and thinking about leadership development. One of the things that we know is that in the fastest 20 or the top 20 jobs that are growing the fastest, they also happen to be low income jobs. And low income jobs were not really meant to be jobs where people were stuck or stay in for long periods of time. That when you look at the tenure of those folks, those people stay in those jobs 20 years. So we have to find ways in which, when we have people in these jobs, what is their internal career progression, but also how do we mirror that that growth and development so that we enable them to be able to take those skills and go other places. Most companies, when they're thinking about growth and development, only think about you growing and developing and staying right here. That is not something that is going to engender trust in your workforce. I don't care if it's men or women. It's not going to engender trust that they will take on risk so that they can go someplace else. The other thing is that when we look at the way we think about benefits, we don't think necessarily about them as wraparounds, where we're talking about, okay, so if we are thinking about childcare, are we really encouraging people through our role modeling that people should take time off for childcare? What does that look like? One of the things that the pandemic has actually taught us is that we now have a year of actually looking at the results of work because we can't eyeball people. Where before we were eyeballing and saying your busyness meant you must have been doing something important. Now we've set a new standard of, we have to be really clear on what the goal is and what the success model looks like. And so in beginning, when we're setting out goals, which performance management is pretty antiquated, we've got to get to the point where what we're asking is, here's the vision of where we're headed. What have you contributed during the last 30 days, 60 days, whatever the time frame, that got us closer to the vision of what this company is about? How we treat customers, how we make money, products and development, as well as how are we surrounding each other and enabling each other to do.
I love that. And Rob, you asked, I think, a really great question too. You said, don't you think that many HR departments have lost that goal as they've been reduced? Many of the functions are being passed on to frontline managers. So Rob, can you come off mute and talk a little bit about that? And would love to get a Denise's perspective on that as well.
First of all, I'm really glad to see Denise nodding her head after I asked that question, because it means that I must not be too far off base. But just as an example in my own career, for like the last 3 companies that I've worked for, the HR department has been reduced to, basically protecting the company and making sure that we're following the employee handbook. I mean, that seems to be, the major part of it. And they've reduced the actual number of employees in those departments. Even at the current place that I work, we don't have any local HR. It's all been consolidated, to a corporate office that basically is 3 people. So, for me, and one of the reasons why I'm on here today is that I want to, make sure that I'm learning some of this stuff, but I think that that's gone away, Denise. And I may, you may not agree with me, but, as I look at some of the, my own personal, experiences, I just don't see much in the way of help coming out with things like that. I do the best job that I can, but again, I'm a frontline manager now. So I mean, there's not really that support coming from the corporate structure. And I was just curious if that's something that you've seen, or, maybe
especially
you're working
from
with
HR,
companies.
right, Rob? You're speaking specifically about HR, not getting a lot of support from HR. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, and Rob, thank you for the question, and thank you for sharing your insight, because that is exactly the crux of the problem. The way we got here is that HR primarily was the place of risk management and compliance. We'll keep you out of jail. We'll make sure that you apply to the law. And we're going to be the keepers of that kind of knowledge. And so what that did was that it reduced the need to just a legal function, instead of pivoting, which is what I'm suggesting, which I'm promoting, is that HR begins to pivot to have the conversation that it's not necessarily the manager's responsibility or capability, I'll say capability, to be all things to employees. It just isn't. We have to create an environment that allows employees to understand how they connect in and can build their career from where they are, whether they stay with the company or they go. We keep going to managers saying, oh, turnover is costing us, blah, 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 blah. And we have these abstract numbers. Well, an abstract number is also like Tuesday, then today is Thursday, right? It's there in the future. I can't affect what Tuesday is going to look like from Thursday. And so I think we have to shift the conversation. Again, it's a three-pronged thing that keeps 3 things that keep keep the company where it is. And the outcome has been exactly what you say, is that HR has been personally marginalized as a function to just keep us out of jail. And for many companies, that's exactly it. The only way that we're going to be able to turn this is that we have to begin to have a different conversation. We have to understand, what is it that we need our employees to do? What do we need our leaders to know and understand and to be able to do? And then what are the structures that we're putting in place that enable the other two to have good conversations that are going to turn this ship, to change the results that were actually happening? So thank you very much for that comment.
Okay, well, I have one more question for you, Denise. If no one else is going to speak up, then I will. As women in business, what do you believe that we have to gain by standing up for gender inequality or inequity? What do you feel like is the change that you'd like to see happen before the 257 years that we've mentioned?
Well, I think, let's put it in this way. For women, what's in it for you to step up and to kind of think about this? So if you're out there trying to start a business, you're trying to raise a family, contribute, or not even raise a family, but contribute to your community, that circle of people. So it's not about you having children. It's about, you have parents, you have sisters, you have aunts, you have uncles, you have a community of people around you, well, as neighbors. Why do I need to do this? Why do I need to change? And I think that, one of the things that for me, it is about legacy. This is not something that one person can do. We can begin to learn how to have conversations that bring us together to help us envision, what does an equitable society look like from multiple places. One of the problems that we struggle with is globalization. We have many voices, many lived experiences, many ideas, many abilities, and there's just such levels of diversity. And one of the things that we've tried to do in the past is we wanted to have sameness. We wanted everybody to be alike, to live alike, and to think about it. And then those who didn't want to, they had to go someplace else. I think we really need to start having conversations of how we can grow this idea of being with people who are not like us. So the first thing is what's your vision of how you live your values? When you say you want to be a team member, what does that really mean? When you say that you want to have integrity, what does that look like? What are the boundaries that you bring to life? One of the things that Brene Brown talks about all the time is that, for us to be successful and to move forward, we have to have three things: boundaries, integrity, and generosity. And boundaries is really around this idea of, what are my values and how do my lived values show up? If I say I'm about kindness and forgiveness, then how can I be kind and forgiving, compassionate, empathetic, and still hold others accountable for who they are? Do I have to just totally cut them off? Or is there something else? And at what point would I cut them off? And obviously, if someone is abusing you, then you definitely want to move away and get cut off. But for the other things, what does that look like for you? Integrity is how am I aligning myself up to my truth, to what I need to do? And that really is about understanding yourself and what it is that you bring to the party. What is it that you're willing to share and to take from the party? But also, how do you take care of yourself? Too often, particularly women, we only take care of ourselves once we've fallen off the cliff. Well, once you get on that road and you get past that point of, now I got to get it done. I got to get it done. I got to get it done. Your brain again starts to shut down and you can't think about taking care of yourself. So how do you take care of yourself during the midst of this change? What does that look like? Where is my edge? How am I feeling? How do I use that so that I can go forward? The other thing that I think that needs to happen is that we really need to understand how to connect and network better. Networking and connecting is not an exchange, tit for tat. It is about making a commitment to finding people who you can have long-term relationships with, and that you both can support each other through things. Being vulnerable, and how do we ask for help? The last thing is about generosity. I'm sorry, the last thing, and I'll be quick. It's about generosity. And how do we be generous of spirit? And really that shows up in the stories we tell about other people. So when we start thinking about this other person and we have this story that says, I don't like you, you're not like me. Oh, you made me nervous because you're not like me. Or I have a question that might hurt your feelings and I don't know how to answer it. Then what we're doing is we're setting up a story that says this person is not strong enough, this person is not good enough, this person is not compassionate enough to hear that I don't know how to ask the right question, but my heart's in the right place. And I want us to grow in a different way. And so by living that and thinking through those things and every day taking one step, 1% better, then we all collectively will close the gap and become 1% better. Think about that every day, 1%. By the end of the year, you'd be 250 some odd day, 50% better than you were today. And those are small things that you can do. Just little things make a difference.
Oh gosh, that's so inspirational, Denise. Thank you. Laura asked a question. If we want a cultural shift, how helpful is it to create change from the grassroots in order to allow awareness that there are alternative ways of being? Or should we focus on top down, such that individuals feel coerced to do something?
So let me put it in the terms of business. If we were thinking about trying to innovate, and we just did something in 9 months where we innovated and came up with a vaccine, I'm not talking about the politics around it, but it took us 9 months to do that. It started with, we need to solve the problem. And the grassroots were the people who were dying saying, and the families of those individuals saying, hey, we got to change something here. And then we forced it up. Innovation only happens when we start having conversations that say the solution, we need a different solution. We need to take the knowledge that we have and apply it in a different way, and then have room to allow change to happen. When we hold on so tight to the old, then there's no room for us to be able to do things. So is it a top down, forcing somebody to do it? Anytime we force people, then people clam up, because the thing we want most is to be in control, and we want to have predictability. Control is really about predictability, okay? So the best way to do it is to get really good about conversations, to get good about inviting people into a conversation around change, to help them understand that staying where we are right now is not in their best interest, what's in it for them, as well as it's not in the best interest of people, of yourself and the people who surround you. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. Understand the power of a conversation, the power of a thought shifts a lot of people. And then there's the change curve. There are those who are going to adopt it immediately. There's going to be the messy middle who are kind of like, I don't know. And then there's always going to be people who say no. Those people who say no, leave them alone. Let them be where they want to be. The rest of us need to go. And guess what? They will come along, because there will be no other place for them to be but to come along. Stop focusing on them. Focus on moving forward. Who are the people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and move forward?
Oh, gosh, I love that. So Alicia asks, self-awareness and empathy are important. Do you think that has changed over the last couple of years in leadership? What are some of the things that can be done outside the norm in association with self-awareness and empathy?
I think the quiet storm that is starting to brew is the fact that leaders are understanding that they need empathy and self-compassion. When you and so here's the proof that I look at. Look at who's talking now. We've got Brene Brown, we've got Simon Sinek, we've got Josh Berwin. We've got all of these leaders who are out here talking about empathy, compassion, accountability, restorative justice. All of that is about how do we operationalize it in the workplace, in our society, so that we can go. If we take a picture and can kind of coalesce all of that, what you're going to see is what the change is going to look like. We are wrestling with what that looks like, but it is definitely there. We are definitely embracing it. More people are lining up. I know many of you on this call our own businesses where leaders are calling you saying, how do we operationalize this? How do I make better decisions in this realm so that I can build the capacity of my team so that they can produce more for the customers that we have at hand and the ones that we're going to grow into. It is here. Believe me, the change is here. We just haven't quite coalesced the conversation so that it's meaningful for us, but we're still in secret little silos. Who can help me? What does it look like? Look around. Who are you listening to? You're hearing these words all over the place. It's there. Have faith. Join the fight.
I love that. And speaking of joining the fight, Susan, you make such a great point when you say, thank you, Rob and Drew, for being part of the conversation today. And it's true. We need everyone to be part of the change that we want to see happen. And it takes enormous courage and strength, I think, for men to join the conversation around real change for gender equality. And it's not surprising to me that Rob Forsey is part of this discussion, because this is the kind of leader that I know he is, having worked with him. But Drew, also really want to thank you for joining today's conversation as well. I want to just invite Susan to unmute and maybe make a comment or two in regards to some of the great suggestions and comments that you've offered on chat, Susan.
Okay. I thought I was rather verbose in the chat, but here we go. I'm involved in Maine's ecosystem, and I mentor entrepreneurs and founders, particularly women and underrepresented founders, and quickly realized that if I was going to do that, I needed to go to the other end of what makes an ecosystem successful, which is follow the money. And a general statistic is that 4% of venture capital goes to women in the United States today. So I don't want to, I would rather, so there's a statement, but what I invite everyone to be a part of, it is my personal mission that I wish to see more women founding businesses. I want to see more women accessing money, and I want to see more women on boards. And I'm not talking the nonprofits. We do really well in the nonprofit world. How about if we take those skills and take them to the corporate and private company boards, where apparently they also pay people to be on that. But by the way, someone mentioned this statistic earlier of a 200-year path ahead. The statistic on changing the makeup of boards is that it'll take 25 years to gain any kind of equity on boards because of turnover, and also having people properly prepared and sitting on the benches. So I don't want to turn this into me being on a bandstand, but those are some of the things I'm thinking about. And to my point about Robert and Drew, thank you, because in my belief firmly, it is when the men are the feminists who sponsor, advocate, and mentor women that we will truly see the change occur. So I applaud the fathers, brothers, uncles, whatever, of the next generation of women. Thank you. I hope I've generated some thought, because as I say, I don't want this to be a statement. I want it to be something that adds to the discussion.
Hey, let me just applaud you, Susan. But the other thing is an actionable thing that women can do is, how about you become allies to helping teach men how to do this? So the next time you have a meeting, grab a man and bring him to the meeting so that they can hear, they can be part of, they can see it's not as scary, and that they actually can ask questions that we're not going to bite their heads off. The same thing is, pick a person of color, pick a person who is not like you, grab them. Ask them to go to their meetings, attend with them, so that you can have an experience where you're more comfortable and you have relationships with people that suddenly you can ask questions that might be insensitive, or questions that, inquiring minds really want to know. But you can do it from a place of space and generosity.
Beautiful. What a wonderful way to wrap up today's session. Everyone, I want you to join me in thanking Denise Cooper, the founder and CEO of Remarkable Leadership Lessons, also best-selling author, executive coach, keynote speaker, to talk with us today about the consequences of gender inequality. I think this has been a dynamite conversation, great questions, great comments, great insights from all of you. And again, just to reiterate, Denise is part of our LeadHERship Global community of extraordinary women. She is a wonderful example of the kind of thought leaders that are part of LeadHERship Global. If you're interested in learning more about our free events, our free resources, or becoming a part of the community, I warmly welcome you to connect with me. Would love to collaborate with you about finding a way of impacting our community of extraordinary women around the world. If you are a high-performing, growth-oriented leader, then we welcome you. And we thank you all very much for dedicating an hour of your day today to talk about this conversation that I think is so important, this idea of gender equality in the workplace and how to ensure that we all take our own responsibility and our own first steps in ensuring that we are allies, we are sponsors, we are friends, and we are champions for gender equality in each of our respective workplaces. So thank you, everyone. I am so grateful for your time and look forward to seeing you at our next LeadHERship Global discussion. Thank you.